Hey yo, Chris here, and welcome to the Delta. And what a banger of a race we ended up getting in the Austrian Grand Prix yesterday. So much so that I just couldn't jump in and shoot a video. This is just a season of firsts for me as your new American fan. I've never seen anything like that. I know that you guys that are veterans probably have flashbacks to the whole Lewis Hamilton and Verstappen battle there in Abu Dhabi, and I don't, because that's the season prior to me tuning in to Formula One. So this is another first. I'm so used to Max Verstappen winning in such dominant fashion that every time something exciting happens, I'm like, oh, I've never seen that before. Whoa, that's cool. Oh my gosh, what does this mean? And the way this race unfolded, I just didn't want to jump into a video and start blabbing off at the mouth, thinking that I know what the hell I'm talking about. But I listened to some other more knowledgeable people, including P1. Then obviously a couple podcasts and F1 pundits and stuff like that, and had to just listen to what they had to say. And it really cleared the air for me. We'll get into it when we get to the top 5. So we'll start the video off. As always, we're going to do the top 5 takeaways of the Austrian Grand Prix. And since so much stuff happened there at the end, we're going to have to kind of break it down even more so, because so much stuff just got forgotten. And I always try to put midfield and backfield markers in a video just because they are a part of the race. It is a race review, and if all we do is talk about the Lando Norris Verstappen incident, then we're not reviewing the race, we're reviewing an incident. So, for the race, overall, pretty boring until the very end. The back markers were pretty much non-existent, particularly Williams, but Kick wasn't much better either. There was a point where I thought Williams was taking steps forward in this season, at least with Albon. I know you have Sargent, so you're not going to be a very strong team. But at least with Albon and Williams, I thought they were going to be a bit more competitive this year. And they seem to be taking steps back. There's 2 races in a row where they didn't really offer anything out there on the track, both drivers. And side note too, this is the second race where Sargent was just miles and miles behind. I almost wonder if James Vowles has just gone to Sargent and said, listen, we can't get rid of you. We don't have a plan to get rid of you. We don't have a plan to replace you right now. Don't wreck the car. We need to save that money for other investments and endeavors. And that's just how I feel now that I've seen Sargent just be so far back 2 races in a row. Then we can go on to the V-Carb RB team, where I thought Yuki was going to have a better performance than he did in Spain, and it didn't happen. And Daniel Ricciardo ended up getting some points, placing in 9th. I really don't know where to put them in the rankings anymore, because I felt that they were clearly a team that was closer to the Aston Martin Mercedes than they are to the Alpine and Williams area. And now I feel like they're in this limbo zone where sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
So I don't know. We'll see what I put them in at the power rankings, if they make the power rankings on my video in the future. But nonetheless, they also just existed, did a little bit better than Spain, but not much. Aston Martin, again, was just absolutely disappointing. The car is absolutely disappointing. Look at that wonderful shadow. That's the best I can do. We're back at work. Anyway, Aston Martin, disappointing. Stroll put together, I think, the best race he can, which is weird coming out of my mouth. As you know, I'm not a big Stroll fan, but given the circumstances that Stroll is in and the way that Alonso is performing, I mean, Stroll is, I think, doing the best he can with the car that he has, and the team's coming up with the best strategy they can. Oh yeah, can't forget about Alonso's punt of Zhao Guanyu there in turn 3. That was absolutely insane. Just come barreling in there, and Zhao just minding his own business and gets sent off the track. The team is just in shambles. Alonso not doing his best work. Stroll outperforming Alonso in many cases. It's just bizarre. Just, again, midfield and back markers just unimpressive. However, there is Alpine, and they were, at the bare minimum, entertaining, and at best, again, better than what most people I think would consider them to be at. You had the middle of the race there where they entertained us with their little battle 1-to-1, Ocon and Gasly. Ocon failed to get points by the end of the race, finishing in 12th, where Gasly did get 1 point there, finishing in 10th. I also thought it was pretty funny when he did finally make that pass on Ocon, and he just goes over the radio and yells, "Ciao." Like, that's a shot fired, right? But that's the midfield. I guess we can also talk about Charles Leclerc because he finished in 11th, and that's technically the midfield, coming in 11th out of 20th. I mean, his race was pretty much over from the start. He got bumped there by Piastri, ruined his wing. They couldn't come up with a tire strategy, and they put him on hards. The hards didn't work, so they had to bring him back and put him on mediums. The sheer fact that he even finished 11th was actually rather impressive. But, I mean, when you're Charles Leclerc and you're Ferrari, your expectations are significantly larger and higher than that. So, yeah, that's the midfield in a nutshell, and the race in a nutshell. I just explained the first, 50 laps? But then we can go on to the top 5, and starting with number 5, I really just hope you didn't turn off the race, because like I said, the race was pretty boring and that exemplifies it, like I said, when Alpine is putting on the show. Then shortly after that, that's where the chaos ensued. I guess we can start at the beginning, where Max Verstappen has to go into that pit stop, and he has a slow pit stop, which allows Lando Norris, when he gets his pit stop, to close the gap coming out. And then right then and there, it was game on, because Max Verstappen no longer had that, I think, 6-7 second lead. It was now down to like 2 or less. And then Max Verstappen locks up on that out lap, closes the gap even more, and now Lando Norris is in DRS zone. And then for the ensuing laps, Lando kept pressing Verstappen, and lunge after lunge, and trying just to overtake, particularly on turn 3. That is the zone of overtaking, and we were just all on the edge of our seats, because in my opinion, and I felt both drivers were skirting the edge of being safe and not safe. Everyone's like hammering down on Verstappen for their unsafe maneuvers, but at the same time, when you're lunging and dive bombing like that, every time you do it, you're increasing your chances of an incident. It's a very, very good move, but if you're going to continue to do that move 1 to 2 times every single lap, you're just increasing your chances of an accident. Nothing illegal. It's just, you can't sit there and say you are surprised they got into an accident and it's solely on Verstappen's shoulders. Like, no, like, Lando Norris is pushing the limits on the track. Lando Norris is the one dive bombing. Lando Norris, it's pretty tough to sit there and just put all the blame on Verstappen. That will lead us then into number 4, where the question becomes, is Max Verstappen's 10-second penalty warranted? And if you look at the footage, you can see right where the incident occurs. I mean, we can break down the footage 3 laps back, 1 lap back, 50 feet back. The incident occurred right there on turn 3. And as Lando is trying to make his turn, or his approach to the turn on the outside, you see Max Verstappen slowly glide to the left, which is in Lando's space. Now, the issue is that he's making the movement in the braking zone, and that's what Lando's complaining about the previous laps on the radio, saying, hey, he can't be doing that. This is dangerous. And, well, yeah, that's why. It's dangerous because at some point, if you continue to do that, the driver behind has no reaction time to make an evasive maneuver in your attempt to block him off. And the way I break it down is, like, think about if you're driving your car. I'm in my car right now. I'm driving down the road, and 2 lanes, and I'm approaching a turn at 45 miles an hour, and I see a sign that says 35. I gotta now approach this turn at 35 miles an hour, and I slow down and go ease into the turn, go 35 and make the turn. Well, if I brake late and approach the turn at, let's say, 42, and suddenly have to make the sharper turn or go wider to create more space so I'm not, like, risking anything, if there's no one behind me, there's no harm, no foul. Like, it is what it is. I wasn't paying attention, so I just carried on. But if there is a person behind me and I suddenly cut them off because I decided that I was going into that turn too quick and I wanted to turn while braking, and I go into his lane and he smacks into me, it's reasonable for him to say, well, that's erratic. He approached the turn incorrectly, and there was no way for me to respond as the car behind him. And that's how I look at this. If Max Verstappen is 20 seconds ahead, he can move all he wants in the braking zone, and there's no harm, no foul. But as soon as you do have pressure applied behind, you now have an obligation to follow the guidelines appropriately. And I think that's why the regulation is so loose, because everyone's like, well, there's no rule that says you can't do it, but it will be investigated, but they make it real loose and lax, and there's a gray area. That's why there's a gray area, so you're not giving penalties to guys that are braking in or moving in the braking zone with no harm, no foul situations. But in this case, there was harm and there is a foul. He took the space. Now, you could argue that Lando had plenty more space. He could have kept pushing. Lando could have kept going to the left himself. There was plenty of room on the track. But the fact of the matter is that he was doing it for multiple laps. I think the argument I have is that since he was moving erratically previous laps and the FIA or the stewards weren't doing anything about it, I feel, again, we're in a situation where the FIA is putting out a penalty based on the result. Oh, well, he was doing that 2 laps ago. Oh, he did it twice in the lap prior. Oh, he did it now that the third. Oh, now, oh, God, an accident. Now, penalty. 10-second penalty. Sorry, we can't do. And that's where I have an issue, is that, like, you just can't wait for the incident to occur to do the foul. But, yeah, I think overall, it's 100% on Max's fault. It's his responsibility to not do those maneuvers and allow Lando enough time and space to make a decision on where Lando wants to put his car. But to the defense of anybody that doesn't have DRS, this is where I also find DRS very, very bad. Like, I understand in the new modern F1 you need DRS currently because you need to be able to have these passing and overtaking opportunities. But in this instance, just like in Australia with Alonso and George Russell, you're not allowing the person that is in the front to do anything to defend himself. Because you create the hot spot. You know, right there in Australia, Alonso has to do something to defend the guy from the guy behind. It causes an accident. Max Verstappen has to have an ability to defend against that DRS car. And in this spot, it's turn 3 of the Red Bull ring. But there's no way he can do it. He basically has to concede that spot. And that's where I get frustrated, because you're like, that's kind of like, I know I have the ability to beat this guy, but because of this weird thing called DRS, I don't have the opportunity to. But that's my little 2 cents on the DRS thing, and I'm pretty sure like that's why that happened. Is like just because Verstappen has no other way to defend himself except skirting the fine line of being safe and then dangerous. It's a very thin line in that situation. And that's where we take off on that. I'm sure there's going to be plenty more of analysis and details on the incident. I am curious to hear that, like, later if it gets brought up to Max and Lando. I mean, after post-race, they're emotional. They all have their strong opinions. Lando's very, very upset. Max Verstappen says, hey, racing's racing. And I was just doing what I had to do to try to win a race. So that's it. That's my take on the incident. I think we can move on from it. It's sad that Lando got knocked out, because he got knocked out and didn't finish the race, while Max Verstappen just finished there in 5th and got a bunch of points. So, like, in the terms of the Drivers' Championship, he gained a significant advantage over Lando in that incident. But then there's much more of the race. Because of all of this, we move on to number 3, which is George Russell's win, and the podium as a whole was not on my bingo card at all. Who would have thought you would have had the race winner be George Russell and then followed by Piastri and Carlos Sainz. When you look at George, he's just doing his job, and he's just racing. Like, he's going to get podium pretty much guaranteed, because he's just biding his time, managing his car, listening to the instructions, and that's pretty much how everybody from him back were behaving. Just like, let's see what happens here, and we'll just, we'll take a 3rd place, we'll take a 4th place, we'll take a 5th place. It is what it is. Max Verstappen's going to win this, And then, like I said, chaos ensued, and George Russell wins, and good for him. It's kind of hard because, like, typically when somebody wins, you want to, like, applaud them. Like when Lando won in Miami, and when Sainz won in Australia. You get Leclerc wins in Monaco. You're like, wow, that was so crazy, and how they earned that. And, yes, some things happened, and that's how it came here. But overall, they did amazing work to get to that point. And it just feels like, well, George Russell was just driving along, and then 2 knuckleheads up front got into an accident, and he takes the victory. That's not to take anything away from his victory, but I think where Russell was sitting, he was sitting at 3rd saying, all right, I'll take 3rd, and then suddenly he goes, wow, I'll take a victory, a free one. But at the same time, I guess you could say, he did all the right things to put himself in that position. Hey, I'm in 3rd place. I had a good qualifying. I had good pit stops. I've been managing my tires. I've been driving the car appropriately. And in a situation that occurred, I get to reap the rewards of 1st place. So good on Russell, and that goes with the same with Piastri and Sainz. I was a little disappointed by Ferrari and Sainz, how they didn't even try to fight for 2nd place. Like, I don't know if the car is just that much worse than McLaren's, or if Sainz's tires were just that much worn out. But yeah, it just seemed like Piastri passed Sainz without a problem. Sainz didn't even give up a fight. And I almost wonder if they just know that their car can't compete. So instead of risking their own incident, especially with Charles Leclerc out of the points, they just said, let him pass, get your 3rd place podium, and, pack it up and call it a salvageable weekend. Because then at the same time, I was also disappointed that Sainz was like, as soon as that accident happened, if I would have been Ferrari, I'd been like, Sainz, you got to push and get on Russell's ass. But that didn't happen. And the same with Piastri. I think Piastri, for a split second, thought he had a chance. But I wonder if his tires were too burnt out. That's not uncommon for Piastri to do. He got past the slower Ferrari, and the team was like, look, you made it to 2nd. And then after a couple laps, they were like, look, you're just not going to catch Russell. Just hold on and take your 2nd place podium. Moving on now to number 2. Haas was battling Perez. So, Haas had a great weekend, obviously, finishing, P6 and P8? I'll correct that in a graphic if I got that incorrect. But I don't know if that's more impressive for Haas to beat Perez, or if that's more disappointing for Perez to be losing to Haas. You have the top 2 drivers right now battling up front, miles and seconds beyond where you're sitting. And you're now battling what's considered, mid-tier to back-tier competition in the Haas cars. Again, it might have just been the perfect storm where Haas put together the perfect weekend with the perfect plan and had the perfect driving and no real incidents. And that just gave them the results they had. But that still doesn't change the fact then that Perez is just not performing. Like, I'm a Perez backer, and we're getting to a point now where, like, I might have to now jump ship and second guess how much I actually think he is a good driver, because it's habitual at this point that he's not performing well. He's performing so poorly that Max Verstappen can have a slow pit. Like, this is what the Twitterverse was saying. Max Verstappen can have a slow pit stop, lock up, battle Lando for 3, 4, 5 laps, and then get into an accident, get a puncture and go almost the entire track, get to the pit stop, get a new set of tires, and still be behind Verstappen at the end of the race. Like you're in the same car. I'm not comparing like Charles Leclerc to Max Verstappen, or Zhao Guanyu or Bottas to Verstappen. This is his teammate in the car that is supposed to be elite, and he's not getting the job done. And it's got to look pretty bad right now for Red Bull as you just extended him, because again, I don't know what kind of contract obligations there are, but it's hard. I can't believe that there isn't a clause that says if you can't perform, we can jettison this contract whenever we want, because that would be concerning to me if I was Red Bull. But if he can't, I mean, they're stuck with him until, what, 2026? End of 2026? Like, this is what you paid for. And if what you paid for, you're going to have to really, really rely on Max Verstappen to win you some Constructors' Championships, which might help out this year, but maybe not next. And now moving on to the number one thing that I take from the Austrian Grand Prix. Despite the collision, and regardless of if you're on Team Lando or Team Max, I'm okay with this style of racing. And the reason why is we're talking about the best 20 race car drivers in the sport, right? They're quick, they're fast, they're agile, they're the best, supposedly, right? I mean, obviously, you get to like your 18, 19, 20, you might have some arguments that there's other, but especially when you're talking about Lando and Max, Sainz, Russell, Hamilton, Leclerc, these guys are the best of the best in the best. And if you don't want Lando and Max pushing the limits and skirting the edge the way that they did in Austria, then you want boring racing. I understand you don't want Lando getting taken out of the race. I understand that you might not want Max Verstappen to be penalized. But if this is the result you get by the two best drivers at Austria, then I'm here for it. It's like that for every sport. Like, we always like to hammer down on like basketball players who miss the game-winning shot, or the quarterback who throws the interception in American football. Oh man, but here's the thing. If they don't throw the interception, if they do make that game-winning shot, it's glorious. If Lando makes that pass, the history books are written with golden pen, right? Same with Max. If Max defends Lando for the entire race, is the most amazing defensive driving you've ever seen, right? But if you sit there and say, well, you want Max to follow every single rule and you don't want Lando to dive bomb because it's dangerous and blah, 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 well, then you don't want greatness to occur. You can't see or witness greatness without risk being taken, and that's where I stand on it. Yes, I think Max Verstappen deserved the penalty. Yes, I also think Lando was maybe a little too aggressive on some of his lunges and dive bombs, but I want them to do that every single race because they are the greatest at their job. And when you're the greatest at your job, you need to skirt the fine lines. But that's about it. There is so much to talk about. I wish I could just have a 4-hour discussion, but I can't. I'm on lunch break, and I only get a half hour. So I hope this video isn't too long. I hope you stuck around for the whole thing. We are now heading to Silverstone to finish off the triple header of Formula One. Thankfully, because as you can tell, I'm back in my vest. We're going to be starting my new bridge project here in a couple weeks as well. So I need a little bit of break myself from all this Formula One insanity. But anyway, that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed Austria. I hope you get excited for Silverstone. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and have fun out there. Bye, everybody.